Hello Anna, hello everybody. My name's Nicola and I live with my husband in Pembrokeshire in West Wales. I've got some notes in front of me because I've never done anything like this before and I won't remember everything I need to say. So excuse me for referring to my notes, but here goes. My gut instinct when this first broke and we were forced into lockdown was that it felt like some sort of mass social experiment. I always make decisions based upon my own personal experience of the world, and I've tried saying to people to imagine what they would think if had they not picked up a newspaper or listened to the radio or watched TV during the last 6 months. Would it actually look like a pandemic to them? It astounds me when I see people slating politicians ordinarily, yet currently they're believing every single thing that they're being told by politicians and the mainstream media regarding the virus. It is It also astounds me that people can believe a sinister scenario from a plot or film, yet they do not believe that this can actually happen in real life. Everything is about perception. I don't wish to cast aspersions on those people who have become fearful, and similarly, I would never wish to alienate anyone who has lost a family member to the virus. But those people who call us conspiracy theorists need to remember that it's simply an alternative point of view, and it's a phrase that was coined by the CIA through dubious motives. People like to castigate conspiracy theorists as loners and oddballs. Well, lockdown gave me the time to research, which I never had before, and the absolute fear-mongering gave me the impetus to look into everything that we were being told. Every day at the beginning of this, we were hearing from the BBC and Sky News the daily death toll. I started to realise that people who were included in this death toll usually had comorbidities more often than not, but this was never emphasised. So hence I started to research. I've listened to some extremely intelligent and articulate people from, people who are not routinely interviewed on mainstream media, such as Peter Hitchens, Lord Sumption, Dr. Vernon Coleman, to Americans such as Robert Kennedy Jr., Dr. Rashid Buttar, Dr. Judy Mikovits. And I've read some excellent articles and interviews with Dr. John Lee in particular in the UK and the author Lionel Shriver, both of whom have written for The Spectator. I work part-time because I'm a carer for my 88-year-old aunt. I'm a teacher by profession, so I do some supply work, and I work 1 day a week currently for a well-known retailer. I've worked through lockdown. I'm not afraid of the virus. Doesn't mean I'm blasé, but I'm not afraid. I'm more afraid of losing my personal freedoms and liberties. My aunt was actually hospitalised from the virus. She basically had a fall. She was housebound. I hadn't seen her for about 3 weeks prior to this because she had told me to keep away because of the lockdown. She was in contact with one person who was a cleaner and who also worked in the care sector. She was very fastidious. She wasn't going near my aunt. She was, making sure she was following all the precautions. But apparently she did have a cough, and my aunt believes that she may have caught it from her. But when I met the first responders at my aunt's home, they actually said to me they didn't think that she had the virus. They said basically they wanted to admit her because she couldn't support her own weight with her walking frame. They said all her obs were fine. Those were his exact words. I stayed at her home because I wasn't allowed to go in the ambulance with her. I cleaned, I washed her bedding, I got it ready for when she was going to come out of hospital. I had a phone call on the way home from the doctor who had assessed her. He said she'd swabbed negative, but just as a precaution, they were going to test her to rule it out. 24 hours later, she tested positive, which I was surprised at. Anyway, she was in hospital for about 6 weeks, mainly because although she's healthy, she is disabled. She uses a walking frame, so she did need rehabilitation and a little bit of work with the physiotherapists and things to get her mobile again. She was in hospital. Well, actually, she was transferred from the one hospital to the Dragon Heart Hospital for this rehabilitation. Dragon Heart Hospital was the only field hospital that was actually utilised in Wales, despite Wales creating a number of them and spending £177 million on them. My aunt she was wheeled around this hospital from time to time. They would maybe take them out if it was a nice day, and she told me she never saw more than about 50 people in it. She said she saw hundreds of empty beds, and she feels that it's been exaggerated by the media. She was in hospital with a number of oldies, as she put it, one of whom was 99 and recovered. But of course, we don't get told these stories by the media. We just keep getting the fear, and fear is an immunosuppressant. I don't trust the figures. I am curious as to what happened with the Australian flu that was predicted last year. We never heard any more about that. And we know the government have recently come out and said that they overstated the COVID deaths by about 5,000. I'm assuming that to be a very modest figure. I'm sure it's far more than that. My father has a business in the Rhondda area of Wales, which was apparently the third worst in Wales for COVID deaths. He speaks to lots of customers. He's spoken to a number of nurses, a couple of funeral directors. The funeral directors have said that they actually were no more busier this year than last year. A couple of nurses have told him that they know of deaths that have gone down as COVID, for example, road traffic deaths that shouldn't really have been registered as COVID. In my place of work, for the retailer, I see and speak to many customers who come in wearing masks now, even though they're not yet mandatory in Wales. Many come in wearing them incorrectly, pulling them down to their chins to make themselves heard, touching their faces, not wearing them over their noses. They complain, a lot of them will complain about others who are not observing social distancing. They jump on the chance to use the free sanitizer. And I'm afraid to say, I'm reminded of hand-wringing tormented souls who just want to walk the wheel and conform, like the prisoners in the film Midnight Express. I've come across one or two customers who've actually recoiled when walking towards me, as if I'm some sort of biohazard. I've seen people wearing chin masks. I've seen, outside of work, I've seen some people driving on their own in cars with masks on. I saw somebody on a bike wearing gloves and a mask, but no cycle helmet. Anyway, I believe that there is a global health mafia, I'm afraid to say. There is a YouTube video by a lady called Dolly Ridings who explains what her findings in detail, which is very interesting. She actually shows us visuals as well. My mother died 8 years ago from bowel cancer. She was only 62 and she was previously healthy. She never drank, she never smoked, she wasn't overweight. However, she was taking a prescription drug for about 10 years before she died, and I researched this after her death, and this particular drug has caused carcinogenic tumours in rats in laboratory experiments. I know of two other ladies who also lost their mothers young. One of them was only 50 and they had both been taking the same drug. I won't name it. I'd like to know why doctors are paid for every vaccine that they administer, because if they were that safe and effective, they would sell themselves. They wouldn't need to be given financial incentives by pharmaceutical industries. Dr. Anthony Fauci is on film as saying at the beginning of the Trump administration that there's going to be a surprise pandemic during Trump's administration, which is interesting, to say the least. I think we really need to follow the money and see who benefits from all of this. If you haven't already watched it, take a look at the movie called Plandemic on London Real, which will give you food for thought. It shows, amongst other things, that we can't even trust the online fact checkers, some of whom are funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. I've already decided that if there is to be any further fear-mongering in schools, with children being made to social distance, staff wearing masks, etc., then I won't be returning to supply teaching yet, as I do not wish to be complicit in this. There are already an increasing amount of children with emotional and behavioural issues. This is only going to get worse if we continue with this nonsense. I really cannot believe that parents are putting masks on children without researching them first. I actually feel that some are wearing them as fashion items and as a form of virtue signalling. I'm sure the novelty will soon wear off. I've never had the time to read up on vaccines previously, and I'd always thought anti-vaxxers to be anarchic, maybe obsessively anti-pharmaceutical types, but I guess that this was down to some subconscious brainwashing by mainstream media. Having looked into it more now, it is very concerning. My granddaughter was born on lockdown day, and I'm extremely concerned about what vaccines will be forced upon her. Robert Kennedy Jr. claims that children in the USA now get offered around 73 vaccines during the first 18 years of their lives, whereas when he was growing up in the 1950s, he said he had about 3. There has been talk of mental health issues for a number of years now. It's almost as if we've been primed to have mental health issues in readiness for this. And these are really going to be exacerbated from now on, especially once the economy starts to plunge. A lot of people may not realise that historically, whenever the unemployment rate has gone up, so has the death rate. Obviously, people can't afford to feed themselves properly. They may be drinking more, taking drugs, committing suicide, sadly. And I'm really fearful of what are we going to see in the next 12 months, especially over the winter, once the economy starts to plunge. Free speech has been suppressed for many years now, and now we are losing our physical freedoms as well as our ability to speak out. And incidentally, I see the mask as a powerful visual reminder of this. I just feel that we need to be very careful of acquiescing to mandatory actions, because as Peter Hitchens points out, once something is made mandatory, it's very difficult to reverse such decisions. It's awful to be cynical, but we've been let down by politicians over the years, and it's difficult to trust those in authority. I think that's all I need to say for now, and hopefully people will continue to speak out. So thank you for listening.